But how do I know she's a prostitute?
You are looking at an alleged John. Police say he was caught with his pants down.
You have the right to remain silent, do you understand?
I didn't know she was a prostitute. I just saw the girl. I was talking to her.
According to police, the suspect was doing more than just talking. He was caught masturbating as he stopped to pick up an alleged prostitute who turned out to be an L.A.P.D undercover cop.
He had his genitalia out, he's masturbating.
And you just happen to have your pants down?
I didn't have my pants down.
The area near Lancashire and San Fernando is ground zero in the North Valley for prostitution. And tonight, the Valley's Human Trafficking Task Force launches a sting operation to target the Johns, men looking to pay a prostitute for sex. The L.A.P.D has an undercover cop walking the streets.
I mean, yeah, there's times it's scary, but she knows there's people in the shadows that you can't see right now that are her protection.
Dr. Stephanie Powell, a former 30-year L.A.P.D veteran in Vice, who now runs Journey Out, a center for survivors of prostitution and human trafficking, takes us through a typical sex transaction in the dark.
And then he's going to pull up. You will walk over to the car, and then he'll usually ask you something like, "Are you dating?" So you'll say yes. And then he'll say, "How much for a?" The next thing he knows, a police car is now behind him and he's getting arrested.
But police are out for much bigger game than just a John caught with his pants down or a prostitute walking the streets. Lieutenant Mark Evans, who runs the Human Trafficking Task Force, says girls walking the streets are often coerced or forced into the life against their will, and many are beaten and abused. In other words, many are victims of sex trafficking.
I would say 90%. Basically, every girl that's out here has a pimp. Almost all pimps are traffickers. I've done over 4,000 cases. A case that stands out in my mind is a guy who used to beat his girls with an electrical cord. But when you get beat enough with an electrical cord, that might break your spirit. So that's kind of how you could be forced into doing something like that.
In the years since they created the Human Trafficking Task Force, police in the Valley have switched their focus and turned the tables on the offenders. Where they used to arrest 10 prostitutes to every John, they now arrest 6 Johns to every prostitute. And they're going heavily after the pimps and the traffickers.
These guys are very violent. They're gang members. The girls, we look at them as victims.
Sex and human trafficking have become the third most profitable industry after guns and drugs. And it happens here in the U.S., not just in third world countries. Another heartbreaking reality on these streets, 10% of the prostitutes are minors. Lieutenant Evans remembers one 13-year-old prostitute he stopped.
She told me that since she was 10 years old, her dad sold her to his friends for crack cocaine.
It's completely unacceptable. How do you have 13 and 14-year-old kids being trafficked for sex in the San Fernando Valley and everybody turn a blind eye?
Arrests have tripled since the creation of the task force a year ago. And as this undercover cop makes her rounds, one of the big targets appears out of the dark. Our camera barely manages to catch him. Police say he is a known gang member and sex trafficker. He tries to recruit the undercover cop, thinking she's a prostitute, then disappears as quickly as he came.
It's just really a game of cat and mouse.
Sounds dangerous.
It can be very dangerous.